God Ptah is one of the most ancient and important Egyptian gods, for there are proofs that show that he existed at least since the first dynasty. In spite of his becoming the greatest god of Memphis gods, yet in the beginning he was a small local god. Then his position and importance grew bigger by time. There was a pointing out to him in very little segments in the pyramid texts, but it's difficult to be sure of the fact that it was due to the lack of his importance in the beginning of the historical ages, or it was due to the will of the priests of Heliopolis to minimize his status and position for the sake of the Sun Creed. Ptah represents the head of the triad of Memphis that's composed of Ptah and Sekhmet and Nefertum. He is a god of arts and handcrafts. He was also connected with Ptah Tatenin, or Ptah of the Standing Out Land, who was connected with one of the theories of creating the universe in ancient Egypt. His name means the builder, and the origin of the word means the opener. As for his looks, it kept a constant shape and a continuous one across the ancient Egyptian times, starting from the first picturing of him in the First Dynasty era on a pot of Tarkhan in Giza. Ptah is pictured in the shape of a man wearing a tight dress, and his 2 feet are almost stuck. His 2 hands come out of the wrappings, and he catches the religious symbols that are related to the gods. The was, or the scepter, ends with the jet pillar and the sign of Ankh, or the key of life. Usually, Ptah wears a hood firmly fixated on his head. Since the Middle Kingdom era, he became pictured with a pointed straight chin instead of the tilted divine chin that's related to gods. God Ptah was connected with Memphis, the capital of Egypt, since the beginning of the historical ages. His connection with that city had a major impact in the increase of the importance and the status of the deity who was a formal god of the known. With the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, Ptah became known as the Lord of Ankhtawi, referring to Memphis. Many researchers tend to believe that the name of Egypt itself, Aegyptus, was derived from the name of Ptah's temple in Memphis, which name was Het Ka Ptah. Ptah has also carried a group of titles that were connected with Memphis area, like Ptah Resesh Eneb F, or Ptah the one who exists south of his wall, and that's referring to the existence of his temple south of Memphis, or by the southern wall of Memphis city. Ptah was a god of arts and crafts in ancient Egypt, so he was known as a maker and the patron of handcrafters and artists. The high priest of Ptah was like the high supervisor of the workers. The very name of Ptah points in its meaning to the maker or the creator, in the significance of his role as a patron of arts and as a creator god of humans. The relation between Ptah and arts and crafts was so strong that he became a creator god, known as the formator of the earth, like God Khnum, who made beings on his potter wheel. He was known as the oldest deity who combined in himself between both of the masculine and the feminine characteristics, and the one who united within his inner self the eternal god Nun and his female mate Naunet. He was considered the first creator god whose abilities in creation formed all the characteristics and components of the universe and existence. That's why he was known sometimes as Ptah Nun. addition to the connection of Ptah since antiquity as a creator god with his image Ptah Ta'Tenen, which was originally connected with the creation operation through Memphis theory in creation and the start of the existence, Ptah was connected with the other world as a result of his being close to the god of the earth in Memphis, Ta'Tenen, and the funeral god Sokher, where Ptah took over some of the characteristics of these two deities, in spite of the fact that Ptah himself was not connected with the other world, much like the picture of the composite god Ptah Sokher, and later on Ptah Sokher Osiris. The nature of the shape of Ptah in the mummy figure with which he is usually represented could give him some characteristics of the netherworld and the funerary beliefs. In spite of the small amount of monuments remaining from Ptah's temple in Memphis, yet there are a lot of monumental and historical proofs that show that it was a grand temple that fits the status of god Ptah, the main god of Memphis, across ages. The cult of Ptah expanded all over Egypt, where certain chapels were dedicated to him, and there was a chapel built for him within the sanctity of the temples of Amon in Karnak, which date of establishment goes back to the Middle Kingdom era. He continued to exist across the different ancient Egyptian times. Ptah was pictured in many scenes and religious reliefs, and the offering scenes in many grand temples. He was also sanctified in many temples in Nubia, including Ramses II temples in Abu Simbel and El-Dor and Jarf Hussein. The sign of Ankh is one of the hieroglyphic signs that played a big and important role in symbolism and bore many proofs and meanings that revolve around the word life in its broad concept. Thus, we could understand through the tens of uses of that sign how it's important and connected to the religious symbolism. In spite of the common use of that symbol that appears almost in every single temple and tomb, within any form of the artistic shapes, of the reliefs of the walls, or the decoration of the furniture and accessories and amulets, yet the origin from which this symbol was derived is still ambiguous and unknown. The sign symbolized life and air and a cosmic symbol connected to gods. It was also known as a sign of power and authority and immortality. As for the pictographic figure of the sign, we find that it takes a simple and clear shape of an almond circle fixated upon a leg or a perpendicular body separated by a horizontal line. About the origin of this sign, the researchers don't agree about it, and many interpretations were told about that issue. Petrie and others saw that it's a belt worn by fishermen and the inferior level of workers who relieved the tombs of the Old Kingdom, for he sees that the belt tied around the waist is the almond circle, while the ribbons that dangle are the tips of the sign. Some others wanted to join between the Ankh symbol and the piece of cloth that covered the male organ in old ages. Gardner differs with all these theories and tended to believe that it's a tie that ties a sort of slippers. The Ankh symbol is known to be a sign of life. Some try to bring it close with the knot of Isis, seeing the resemblance in shape, for both of them represent a type of knots, in addition to the replacement of the Ankh symbol with the Tet symbol, like what happened between the Bat amulet and the knot of Isis, and that's in the appearance with Jet and the symbol of Osiris. They saw that both symbols come from one origin, but each of them took a distinguished shape after that, and they differed from each other. Loret made a comparison between the Ankh sign and the mirror, and said that there is a possibility that the origin of the life symbol is one type of the mirrors, knowing that one of the names of the mirror is Ankh. There were many opinions about the origin of the sign, and it's difficult to say which of these opinions is accepted or confirmed, for there is an open door about the explanation of the origin of this sign. We're still waiting for new discoveries to prove with a solid proof the origin of the Ankh. Anyway, the sign of life had played a vital role as a symbol, for it had appeared connected with the gods and goddesses in many reliefs and scenes, and was connected with kings and many subjects of the daily life and the nether world, and usually the king is pictured receiving the Ankh from the gods as a proof to their support for him and the confirmation of his authority and his connections to gods. The Ankh was connected to the nether world, for it became the hope of the dead to resurrect, and the dead were called the Ankhu. The amulet of the heart was known since the beginning of the ancient Egyptian history, and it took its place based on the importance of the heart in the eyes of the ancient Egyptian. For the Egyptians believed that the heart is the location of the intelligence and experiences. Thus, the Egyptian revered the heart and expressed its position and value in his art and his creeds and his language and poetry. The Egyptians excelled in describing the heart with many meanings and examples, such as saying that the heart of the human is his God, and saying the heart of the person is his life and heaven and safety. The heart was known in the ancient Egyptian language with two major names. They are the Ib and the Hati, and from these two names many words were derived that are connected with the heart and its parts and jobs and the diseases that affect it. The Egyptian has accurately distinguished between the heart as a muscle or an organic part in the body, which he called Hati, and the heart in its spiritual and materialistic meaning, being the center of perception and feeling and emotions and thoughts and wisdom, and called it Ib. In the funerary texts from the New Kingdom, we find both of the words Hati and Ib used. The heart in the Semitic languages points to the meanings of the mind and conscience and perception and will and intentions and feelings and passion, in addition to its symbolism as a materialistic organ in the human body. The word Ib has joined the word Hati in most of its meanings, which sometimes points to the chest. God Ptah has acquired a great status and importance during the New Kingdom by including him with the great deities, especially Amun-Ra, and that has appeared in the collections of the statues existing in the chapel of the great temple of Abu Simbel, and in the names of a big number of kings like Merenptah and Siptah. Being a patron of arts, Ptah was sanctified in some areas like Deir el-Medina, where the artists lived and the workers who worked in building the royal tombs lived. God Ptah Soker Osiris represents a combination that joins between three deities in one god with the human form of a man wearing a tight dress, who is Ptah, with a falcon head, who is Soker, and a white crown, the Atif, that's related to Osiris. He holds with both hands the traditional three symbols Heka and Was and Ankh. This composition appears in some places and temples, but it's clearer in the temple of Seti I in Abydos. The triad of gods is not a strange concept in the ancient Egyptian religion, for it existed in the famous triad of Osiris and Isis and Horus, the god and his wife and their son. The idea appeared whenever there was a need in a certain part of Egypt to form that unity, like the political unification between several nomes which had one god each and had to unite in religion. Egypt has always been in history the land of multiple religions, and usually each deity stood alone or was joined in trinity or in octonary or in Eid with others. But God Ptah was unique in gathering two other gods beside himself in one entity and one form, the form of Ptah Sokher Osiris, represented in one figure and worshipped across the country.